And nuclear energy is, of course, the most prominent one. There's a strong energy source, provides a lot of electricity in a small, from a small place, from one facility. It is difficult to beat that delivery of any other energy source. And in particular, in the time when climate change keeps track of what is the carbon footprint of different kinds of energy sources, it is an important contributor in many countries' energy mix. And nuclear security should also be seen in the perspective of continued enabling of nuclear power, also in that perspective. Other contributors in the civil sector come from the use of radioactive sources, but they are also somehow anchored in a nuclear fuel cycle, which I come back to. And the civil sector sees research establishments, research reactors, and research reactors can produce radioactive substances that are put in different kinds of use in the civil sector. Radiation therapy would not be what it is without cobalt sources. Diagnostics, oil welling is important for use of radioactive sources for the profile of the boreholes, etc., etc. Of course, also in the civil sector, it comes waste. So the waste management is another important field that also needs to be considered from a security point of view. Often enough, one refers to security, of course, in the military sector, but in the civil sector it is mostly associated with guards, gates, and barbed wires. Not very friendly things. But having those measures in place, and also recognizing that activities can be formed in different ways, it is something that enables the continued use of both nuclear power and radioactive sources, and gives trust, and it is a way forward for cooperative efforts and interaction. So let us take a little look at the fuel cycle. And I have put here the dual nuclear fuel cycle, because it is one and the same fuel cycle that can enable the civil sector use of nuclear power and radioactive sources, and also giving the material that ends up in military programs. It starts from the bottom left side with mining, uranium. That's the core piece of it all. Mining and milling of natural uranium. Later on, conversion and enrichment to enrich its content of the isotope uranium-235, which enables the fissile properties to work in nuclear power, but also in the weapons. Later on in the enrichment, if it goes further, it can give supply to the military sector. In the civil sector, we have fuel fabrication for nuclear power plants, and we have the use of the fuel in nuclear power plants, and subsequent to that, there are different options. It can be a disposal of the fuel without reprocessing, or in some countries, the fuel is reprocessed and plutonium is produced. And plutonium, in its turn, can be used in fuel for new nuclear power plants, or it can go into the military sector. Finally, all of it has to be taken care of at some point, either for storage, waste storage, or in final depositories. And this is one of the items that are now heavily discussed all over the world, I would say. What are the storages? What are the disposal strategies that are effective and also acceptable for the general public? There are some solutions, but we are not going to discuss that at length here. So all of this works in an international environment that sets the ways for how it should be managed. So I have put here the international system at large for protection and peaceful uses, recognizing thereby that this is a matter for each country to decide. It designs its own system for its purposes and use, but at the same time it tries to keep it as part of the international system at large, with international conventions and bilateral agreements, in particular in the area of peaceful uses of material. And there, the nuclear safety and nuclear security obligations, undertakings and policies are essential. They are anchored in a national system, the national legislation and regulatory system. And it is the foundation, I would say, for a lot of communication, cooperation and interaction, both nationally but then internationally. I think it's worthwhile to flash the different components of this international system, recognizing that they are there, but it is for each country to decide whether it wants to join them. And in the non-proliferation sector, which is there, we have, of course, the Non-Proliferation Treaty, which Pakistan has decided not to enter into. We have also the Zanger lists for technology control and the subsequent nuclear supplier group arrangements, which is not a treaty, but still it's part of the situation. I would say also that all countries, whether or not member of NPT, but recognizing that NPT has a very special obligation related to safeguards agreements. But also Pakistan has safeguards agreements with the IAEA for the reactors that are operating for electricity purposes. In the nuclear safety sector, there are several conventions to warn about accidents in an early stage, to provide assistance to each other should an accident happen, a nuclear safety convention, and a joint convention on the safety of spent fuel management and on the safety of radioactive waste management. And there are codes of conducts. And you see that this is a sign of desire, an international desire, to make sure that there is a good foundation that is internationally agreed and implemented in all countries to make prerequisites for safe operation. And similar in the nuclear security field, we have two conventions, I would say. Suppression of acts of nuclear terrorism, which has been established in the UN in New York, and the Convention on the Physical Protection of Nuclear Material and Nuclear Facilities, which was recently amended and became stronger. And then another important components are the IAEA safety standards and security guidance. And all of this somehow establishes a framework, foundation for how nuclear activities are managed. I said in the beginning that I think that all of this is a starting point for development and also the foundation for development takeoff. And I think that there are three particular principles that are important in this regard. First, the recognition that there is a comprehensive scope should be of the national system, that it should, one way or another, include all nuclear material and radioactive sources, whether they are in the military sector or in the civil sector. One doesn't need more necessarily protection than the other, but it is different kinds of management that come into play. The second one is the the approach to international commitments and standards, and recognizing that these conventions and standards and implementation of them is a way of demonstrating the national values and commitments for safety, for security, and with certain arrangements, also how these activities are peaceful. And then the third part is confidence building through communication and international cooperation. If one looks into the text of the conventions and treaties, in basically all of them, there goes a red line of encouragement for the state parties to cooperate and help each other with the implementation of these conventions. It is very obvious when you start looking at them en bloc, one more than the other. So that stands out. And it is also a way for the state parties to participate in the assemblies of that brings together these state parties to talk about their achievements, to talk about what has been done and how different problems have been solved. So, if we go in now to the second part, namely what are the opportunities and challenges for peace and development, having recognized this foundation for it. And I have put down measures that may facilitate civil sector nuclear development for Pakistan. And to me, and I want to discuss it with you, it stands out that one important thing to consider is the clarification of scope of the different kinds of activities and recognize the value of if a full separation were done between the military program and the civil sector use of nuclear material and radioactive substances, believing that that is something that could and would facilitate development and cooperation. And the opportunity here is that it would somehow result in incredible clarity in how different materials are used. It would not generate a feeling or a perception that there is a spillover from the military sector to the civil sector, or vice versa, from the civil sector to the military sector, which probably is the more sensitive one. It would very likely facilitate communication, give references, and facilitate the openness of programs. The challenges there, this is not an easy thing, of course, and I think that the most obvious challenge is that it requires some new thinking. And always when you have to do something in a different manner, this is difficult, and it needs, of course, consideration, thought through, and all of that. There are also some practical steps that would be required, and that is a renegotiation of the safeguards agreement. That would have as a benefit that such a process would very firmly be known by all states, because it would be something that is discussed in the IAEA. But still, it's something that stands high up on a list for facilitating and enabling further development. So what more? And confidence building is goes like a red line here. And I would say, after having had the privilege of working with Pakistan authorities for some time, Chairman Bhatt, but Chairman Jamshed Hashmi, in establishing some of the features of the regulatory system in Pakistan. I think that you should let the world know about the Pakistani achievements. And you have constructed and operated 5 nuclear power units, and this operation has gone on for, the last one was taken on half a year ago, and the earliest one, as was said, 45 years ago. This is a fantastic record that you have. And you have 2 more plants under construction, and this will be a significant jump up in supply of more carbon-free electricity. You have had no accidents, and as far as I know, no severe incidents. You have a system that provides good control of radioactive sources. You have actually implemented radiation control at borders. I don't know all of them, but I know that there are several of them that has this feature intentionally. And you have a regulatory authority with good standing. You have infrastructure elements here, a newly established nuclear security support center. You have training of your own staff, and there are occasions in which you invite for regional participation and from other countries. All of this is something that could be shown and presented in a much more broader way. So you could have like a grand vision. You could be one of the leaders in infrastructure development, and you could become and take up technology development, and if together with other countries, and become a reliable partner for that in the civil nuclear sector. We are now talking about the civil nuclear sector. So for what needs to be done for that? Well, one can say that still you have the centers, but maybe they need to be a little bit further developed. And there is coordination that needs to take place with countries that have similar establishments in place. You obviously have a lot of interaction with China, but you also have some with the United States, and you have it also in some ways with the European Union. All of that can be further developed. I think you have a great potential to help newcomers in their efforts to embark on nuclear programs. There is a lot of discussion on how nuclear power can be introduced in new countries, and you are in the process. You have experience and you are in the process, although you are not a big supplier, but that could be also a benefit. And maybe there is room for participating in projects for technology development. And now a lot of work takes place for new advanced reactor technology and small modular reactors, which may be a solution for the future, since light water reactors are so very expensive to put in place. Radioactive sources are still not user-friendly from the security point of view. It can be further improved globally. And as I said before, there is a lot to be done in the waste management sector. Your achievements should be much more communicated in my mind, and more participation in networks, show up in journals, etc., etc. So I think that there is a very good potential for development, and also then for peace, because with development follows peace most often. So implementing the vision is the goal, and together with my old friend Jamshed Hashmi, we were speculating a little bit, and one reflection of the chain of peace and development in the civil nuclear sector could be the following. If you feel secure, and people and facilities around you, which can be also referred to as the nation, feels safe, you likely wish to communicate the achievements and reach out for more, since you are standing on a solid ground and thereby having peace. So that was what I wanted to share with you today and hope for a discussion. So thank you for your attention.
Nuclear threat. It was a nuclear crisis. It was probably at the brink of a very major war that nobody knows what happened. We lived again in '87 when the Indians launched the brass tacks exercise and deployed with live ammunition against us. And the only thing that stopped them was when Ziaul Haq went to New Delhi and sat next to Rajiv Gandhi and whispered in his ear that our newly acquired F-16s are able to reach Trombay. And then very quickly, we had withdrawal of forces, and we had an Indian delegation in the Foreign Office to negotiate the treaty on non-attack against nuclear facilities. And we completed that treaty in one day. It was not ratified until a long time ago, but it was negotiated and agreed by the Indians in one day. And that's, I think, an indication of the mindset that we did. We had another crisis in 1990 when the Kashmir revolt broke out. Again, a threat from the Indians and the action, visible action on our part to start mating our F-16s, which brought Mr. Gates to Islamabad and New Delhi to negotiate. In 1998, when India exploded its nuclear weapons, Advani taunted us. You don't have the capability. The game in Kashmir has changed because now India has nuclear weapons. We have a big bomb. It was not until we exploded that this balance was re-established. Maybe Advani was provoking us to explode. Perhaps that was his intention in order to escape the odium. But we had to explode. And we did, and I think it was the right decision. Again, in 2002, we had a 10-month-long confrontation with the Indians. There were, to my knowledge, at least 2 occasions when we had an alert of Indian air preparations against Pakistani positions, and we responded. And we responded with very explicit statements of what we would do. And I believe that the credibility of that statement stopped what happened. Now, today, these are the crises we live through. Today, although we don't recognize it, we may be living through another potential crisis at this time. And I say this for several reasons. We have almost a perfect storm. We have a revolt in Kashmir, which is being brutally suppressed. We have violations of the ceasefire every day by the Indians. We have cross-border terrorism from Afghanistan and on the Eastern Front. We have an Indian claim that they have conducted a surgical strike against Pakistan and that they will do so again if there is a terrorist incident. There is an Indian doctrine which says we can conduct a limited war against Pakistan, and we have a cold start doctrine, which is not merely a doctrine, which is a doctrine that has been executed with the forward deployment and forward stationing of Indian strike forces. They have the capability. To which Pakistan has responded that if there is a attack against Pakistan, we will respond with tactical nuclear weapons. At which stage would the confrontation between India and Pakistan escalate to the nuclear level? That is uncertain. It will depend on so many factors. The Indians, for their part, have now said that they would consider a response of a surgical strike to be a sub-conventional response. The question is, if there is a terrorist incident, India resorts to a surgical strike, so-called surgical strike across the LOC or the border. Will Pakistan consider this a sub-conventional response or a conventional response requiring escalation to a higher conventional level? And what would then be the response of the Indians to launch the limited war, the cold start? To which Pakistan's response would be what has declared is the tactical nuclear missiles. This is a scenario which is not incredible. A terrorist incident will happen, for certain, because of the nature of what is happening in Kashmir, what is happening across the border on the western side. A terrorist action event, whether Pakistan likes it or not, is likely to happen. To which India will respond, and because it has talked itself into the concept of a surgical strike, it will have to do something or lose credibility. So we are in the midst of a situation which could escalate to a major crisis at any time. And I think the world powers are looking at that. There has been a lot of talk about trying to defuse the India-Pakistan situation, trying to defuse Kashmir, but nobody has so far had the determination to do it. At this time, there are statements from Indian generals, the chief of the army, who says, I can fight a two-front war. And there is a statement from the air chief which says, I can pinpoint and destroy Pakistan's nuclear weapons. Now we all know that by itself, India is not capable of doing that. Our weapons are too many, too diffused, too disguised for them to do it. Is it possible that they believe that the Americans will support them? Is that a possibility that we can completely discount given the talk of an Indo-US alliance that is so prevalent today and of which we have seen evidence in the ask of the Americans to ban the LET, to ban the JEM, to stop anything happening in Kashmir, to accept the status quo in Kashmir? Is it possible that the Indian self-confidence emanates from some kind of an assurance that they have received from Washington? This is a question. I don't have the answer, obviously. But what I say is, we are in the midst of a possible impending crisis, a nuclear crisis with India. and we need to give thought as to how to address it. One option is capitulation. We have a message from the Indians. Give up Kashmir. Everything will be okay. Everything will not be okay, but this is what they ask. Is that something we accept? Or is there another route, a more difficult route, which is to go in, take a position of strength, and reason with the world powers to resolve the Kashmir issue and to build some form of security between India and Pakistan at the military level. I believe it is time for us to bring in both the United States and China into the equation and to form another quadrilateral mechanism, as we have done with Afghanistan. I believe we should have another quadrilateral mechanism of Pakistan, India, US, and China in order to address the issue of peace and security in South Asia. I do not believe that Pakistan and India by themselves can achieve this objective. I thank you.
This was a feeling of fear that thank God, and I always say that thank God we made the bomb. And I would like to say something about making the bomb, which I missed in my earlier discussion. Had embargoes not been imposed on Pakistan for peaceful nuclear reactors and nuclear energy, Pakistan would not have made the bomb. It was our hectic efforts in the Atomic Energy Commission to manufacture and prepare spare parts and replacement equipment. And Mr. Munir Akram, Ambassador Munir Akram just mentioned that we worked so hard to make what was denied to us from Canada and from the rest of the world, to make equipment and materials, including fuel, to keep Karachi nuclear power plant operation, that when the time came for us to build the bomb, we had the facilities and we just converted them to manufacture, design and build the bomb. Therefore, it is a message to the world that please do not treat us as somebody who would misuse our nuclear capability. We want to use it for peace and development in this region. Thank you, Mr. Munir. Do we have a connection with India? Is not coming on.
They will be coming in the next session.
Happy Man is not. Yeah. Okay. So that gives us time to hold a discussion. Before I invite questions, I made some comments. This is in continuation to what was said. I believe at the IAA or in other meetings, just inside the Indian border on the Indian side. And then under SARC, that electricity generated by that nuclear power plant is supplied to Pakistan. And we pay the Indians for that. How silly these embargoes would look at that time. A nuclear power plant which was denied to us is built on the other side in India, and it supplies us electricity and makes profit. And we cannot set it up in our country. The other question that I have asked in such fora is, supposing there is a war between India and Pakistan, and I wish there is never a war between India and Pakistan, and an Indian army unit, armored unit, has just entered the Pakistani territory, and we use a nuclear weapon to destroy it, have we committed a very serious crime? We have thrown the bomb on our territory to destroy an enemy. So this is a theoretical question, but hypothetical question. But it tells us that please do not impose embargoes on countries for peaceful development of nuclear energy. There will be peace. And now I take the opportunity to ask questions from the, please introduce yourself and after आपने वो पीछे आपके उन्होंने he raised the question. Is the mic?
My name is Syed Masha, and I'm the coordinator of the Zabas Rule of Law Center and a member of the PIIA. I have two brief questions, one to Ms. Anita. As we know about the START Treaty, the Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty between the United States and Russia, and how that has gone on to 3 forms, is there any effort by IAEA to encourage that, maybe not so much for arms reduction, but maybe the stopping of the development of new numbers of nuclear weapons, and that could be an effort to start peace again, to a certain extent? And to Ambassador Akram, you spoke about possible United States assurances to India. In your capacity as an ambassador, can you tell us a little bit about maybe possibly Chinese assurances that have brought confidence on the Pakistani side? Thank you.
Okay, so this one. So thank you for the question about IAEA. The IAEA is an organization that works very strictly on its mandate, and that is twofold, one can say, to promote the development and use of nuclear energy and nuclear applications involving radioactive materials. It is also there to verify undertakings in safeguards agreements, and as part of the other piece, to develop standards for conduct. It does not have a mandatory function in the disarmament sector. So it is not to be expected that they would in any way add on to the process of disarmament agreements between the armed countries. If they are requested by one or two nuclear weapon states, they can perform some services to them. For example, some of the material that has been coming out of earlier disarmament agreements between the USA and Russia, standing in between the two sectors. They have helped verifying the quantities, making special arrangements for that. But that was a kind of a special case, so I'm afraid that the simple answer to your question is no, in this regard.
Thank you. Let me take both your questions. First of all, with regard to the START Treaty and the US-Russian relations as far as the nuclear triad is concerned, I think that one of the underreported issues is how the stability of the mutual assured destruction doctrine, how this is being eroded by technological developments in the US in particular, and the response in Russia. I think the two major developments are, one, the new so-called fuse weapons that the US is developing to have nuclear explosions closer to the target. This is going to increase the destructive power of US nuclear warheads by 3 times. So the question is, why is it needed? If the doctrine is mutual assured destruction, it's already there, why is it necessary to increase destructive power by 3 times? So the second development is ballistic missile defense. The US is developing 3 systems. One, of course, is 2 are already deployed. One, the Aegis is deployed, and the THAAD, the theater system, already deployed, as in South Korea. And now they're developing also space-based tracking of missiles. So the Russians are responding, and I think the Russians are developing MIRVed missiles, which can be launched at very, very short notice. So I think the whole mad stability is being eroded by what's happening, and there is no discussion between the two on how to restabilize the situation. And now with China coming in, with the deployment of THAAD in South Korea, and the Chinese sense of the US penetrating into their defense, I think it's going to further
be done. But I think that NSG also today is having some difficulties with this. And the position of India is, of course, part of the difficulties that NSG as an organization has entered into. They earlier had very clear rules that NPT, safeguards agreements, IMSA 225 for physical protection, etc. But the new arrangements with India has somehow rocked the boat. And I don't think it's clear where it's going to land at this moment. In the discussion there has been different comments made on the non-proliferation and credentials and issues. And I think it's fair to say that it's not only technical, not only the subscription to NPT, although a majority of the countries still would like that to be the case. But it's also how the non-proliferation or non-spread of the technology, uncontrolled spread of technology, has been exercised. So this creates, of course, both an opportunity and a challenge for Pakistan. You have been very clear in stating that you deserve, in your opinion, you deserve the same treatment as India and the same status. And this is also something which, as you know, is being debated, whether this can be brought up in that perspective. So I think the opportunity is that the question is being discussed, and the challenge is how to present the case in a way that it would get attention and feelings of reasonable approaches of these members. Because they do exist, this club exists, and it exercises some power. At the same time, I think it has some flexibility in it, because the ground rules are, you continue to make business with China. The opportunity, I think that there is an opportunity there, but it's very much unclear how to exercise that opportunity.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to compliment each of the three of you, even though the Chair is not supposed to have made a presentation. But I think you established an excellent historical framework that was very relevant And both have been absolutely, the other two presentations have been so informative and stimulating. I'd like to request Anita Nilsson to comment, and since you're not a Pakistani, fortunately for you, unfortunately for us, all the good work that has been done in Pakistan for the past 40 years before we started our nuclear weapons program, the careful building of the infrastructure, the excellent safety record, reflecting enormous sense of responsibility to the world and to ourselves, wiped out, ironically, by the man who is called the father of the Pakistani bomb, which at one stroke completely disregards the enormous historical contribution of so many hundreds of scientists and technologists. And you ask us to tell our story better to the world. We find the story completely blocked because of books and books that have been written about how we tried to supply North Korea, Iran, Libya. Now, how much do you think that will remain an obstacle to any attempts by Pakistan? Because any time I happen to have spoken at a nuclear conference at the Carnegie some years ago, and the skepticism that one found, the moment I mentioned Dr. A.Q. Khan, and I made the mistake of saying I've had the dubious distinction of presiding over a meeting where Dr. A.Q. Khan seemed to be a very humble, innocent participant. Oh, that was taken very, very strongly note of. How dare you say anything positive? So that is one. And the other question or comment I want to address to Ambassador Munir Akram for his most scintillating presentation is the terrible tragedy in Pakistan of the militarization of nuclear policy. I mean, in all countries, the military is the custodian. But the conceptual policy vacuum we find at the leadership level in the political domain, the lack of thinking through by leading political parties with position papers on this, such an important subject, is astounding. I do not recall any major political party convening a meeting, a seminar, a public interaction on this. So therefore, do you see the continued dominance of the military in our nuclear weapons policy to set us at a perennial disadvantage? Do you, however, feel that behind the facade of Indians' civilian democracy, the Indian military actually calls the shots, whether it is Siachen, Sir Creek, or nuclear weapons? Thank you.
Thank you. Your question is basically, Dr. Khan's shadow, will it prevail for the future? Now, again, there is no factual way of answering this question, but one can have a sort of a debate and discussion about it. And I would say that it depends on you and how you are approaching this subject. And there are different scenarios. Of course, with time, this shadow will pale in its color. That is also clear. But you may wish it to go quicker than that. And I think that in that regard, there has to be a presentation of something new. A new start, a new direction, something which would overtake the considerations of the past. Of course, you can deal with it in a different way, have a trial and all of that, but you have chosen not to do that. So then the other opportunity or option to move on with the difference and make that clear that this is anchored in your records, because they are strong. Your records are strong with the science and the safety and all of that. So you anchor in that, but still rethink, move on.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Javad. It's always stimulating to receive your questions and comments. And I think the question you posed is an important one, but also a fairly provocative one. And let me respond by saying, once I asked my friend, my colleague at that time in New York was Sergei Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister, and I asked him one day, I said, what are your instructions? Have you got good instructions with regard to, this is, I think, the Iraq War or something. And he turned around and he says, you get the instructions you deserve. And with regard to the formulation of policy, as I'm sure that my colleagues, my Foreign Office colleagues, and Mr. Najmuddin Sheikh, as he would test, policy is made where it is made, and wherever there is a determination to make the policy, that's where policy is made. And in the question of our nuclear program, policy has shifted. During Mr. Zulfikar Ali Bhutto's time, policy was very much under his control. Under Ziaul Haq, policy was under his control and Ghulam Isaaq's control. So, which was military, which was civil, it's very difficult to say. Since then, I think there have been periods where the politicians have willingly divested themselves of the responsibility to make the nuclear policy for their own reasons. And I don't want to conjecture, but let me say that in many cases, they did not want the responsibility of having some hard decisions made by the military because of their relationships and their vulnerabilities to pressure from certain quarters. And therefore they left it to the military. There was no meeting of the National Security Council or Committee or whatever you said for so many years, until recently when the new Prime Minister took over, and there have been several meetings that have taken place. So it's policy will be made by those who want to make policy. So, I think we have to look into ourselves as to, we shouldn't get into this is the military is doing this or not doing this. The military will make policy if the politicians don't make policy. We have to make. So, I think the Indians obviously have had greater civilian control because their system has been more consistent. They have the National Security Advisor who plays a very important role in the whole thing. But again, I think the comparisons which are made internationally between the Pakistani program and the Indian program and the control of the two programs with regard to safety and security and so forth, the Pakistani program is considered to be more secure and safe because of the military's involvement in the program, and the Indian program is considered to be somewhat less as such. So I think there are pros and cons. I'm not very sure exactly how much civilian control there is in India, but there is at least the fiction of civilian control in India.
I'll just add to your comment about proliferation, so-called proliferation by Dr. A.Q. Khan. I cannot disclose all the facts, but I would just like to say that it is said that he gave information to Libya, which never made the bomb, and then to Iran, which never made the bomb. He found out after destroying Iran, the Americans found out. And to Korea, they have now made the bomb, North Korea. But I would like to say that giving drawings of an ultracentrifuge is not helping a country make a bomb. Making a bomb is very much more than that. That is only the beginning. And you cannot, if somebody gives me the drawings of a motorcycle and I do not have the machine tools and the experts, I'll never be able to make a motorcycle. And making a bomb is a very complex situation. So the kind of punishment we are being given because of what Dr. A.Q. Khan is over-exaggerated. They should realize that simply sending some drawings to these countries would not help them make the bomb. I would like to, maybe that hand came up before, so please introduce yourself and we should have, and there will be one more question after that. Aapke baad ek aur.
I think this lady has been putting up.
Oh, I'm sorry. You are next after that.
Thank you so much for the stimulating presentations. But let me raise one or two difficult questions which are sort of troubling me. One, I am a skeptic, being an academic, so I'm a little more curious from Ms. Anita to know what are some of the risks that you see with reference to Pakistan's nuclear program and also the safety guards? You have given a very rosy and very promising picture that is very good to hear. But yet, if one were to think in terms of what are some of the risks that need to be covered up and improved, what will be some of those areas? And in the same context, if one is thinking through, this area has been described as a nuclear flashpoint. So if there is a, would you enter in the realm of speculation? What are some of is there a possibility that you see, a possibility of any nuclear fallout between the two? So that's one part of it. I have two questions for Ambassador, which I thought was very illuminating presentation. One, I want to know, you are familiar with engagement between Taliban and Jaswant Singh, very long and very detailed. I wonder if there is a possibility, or have you come across any possibility whereby something like that could happen between Pakistan and US and Pakistan and China now, that you have a long, detailed and very engaging kind of conversation, and therefore you think in terms of shared visions, shared values, and shared understanding of things. So that is one part where speculation one would like to see, or any possibility that one would like to see. Second, you also spoke, and you were very right pointing out that India and Pakistan were very close to serious crisis in 2002. But then it is equally important to sort of recognize what was Pakistan doing in 2002, which really sort of ignited the crisis globally and locally when one is thinking on that. And finally, the issue of deficit of trust between India and Pakistan. How do you explain 2008, this Bombay incident, which really turned things totally in a different way and shape? Thank you so much.
Risks with the nuclear program. Yes. Of course, a nuclear program of any kind, it has to be managed in a safe and secure way. This is the starting point. And if there would be a change in the attitude towards maintaining highest standards of safety and highest standards of security, that would be risky. So, and we saw in the accident of Fukushima how, like, decision routes can be very influential in determining the development of an accident. So this combination of equipment and competence with people and ability to take the right decisions at the right moment, they are fundamental aspects of running a nuclear installation. That is clear. I think there is an additional risk for Pakistan, which I haven't mentioned before, but I know that there has been difficulty of obtaining some of the essential equipment for a nuclear power plant, which has no real bearing on non-proliferation or security or any of that. And very unfortunate, but it's part of the overall picture. So that is a kind of a risk, and one that also should be, it would change if there is a kind of another direction that would enable a more open interaction and cooperation between different states, and then recognize that some equipment are for safety and they should not be subject of any reduced access due to rules of NSG, which are out of scope in that case. So things like that are risks, I would say.
Before Mr. Munir Akram answers the second and the third question, I would like to add to this. The Atomic Energy Commission sets up and operates these facilities, but there is a nuclear regulator. Mr. Jamshed Hashmi founded that, and this regulator is independent of any other organization below. It is independent of Atomic Energy Commission. It can carry out intrusive inspection, and it is the only regulator in Pakistan which can come unannounced to a facility, nuclear facility, and say you are doing the wrong thing, shut it down. They have done that many times, and we are so very proud of it because the regulator has the authority, the ultimate authority to let something be made or manufactured or operated unless it is safe. And then a very important development that has taken place in the last 10 years is the National Command Authority. This is run by the Army, Army officers. It makes sure that security of nuclear resources, whether in a nuclear medical center or whether in a power plant or wherever, they are under tremendous safeguard. And the kind of innovation, I've told my American friends that don't you think that if we have the capability of making a bomb, we can develop develop techniques to make sure that these devices and these facilities are protected properly. And I assure you that these are, I wish I could, there are institutes which have been set up, the National Institute of Safety and Security, the Pakistan Center for Excellence on Nuclear Security, and the IAEA is helping develop. They have provided funds to someone, and they visit that. And Professor Hatter, he visited that, one of those institutes. He was impressed by the kind of training the people are given to make sure that our nuclear material is safe and in good hands. And Mr. Munir.
Thank you. Let me just also add on this. I think our Western friends know our weapons are pretty safe. I think Mr. Obama has said so several times, that Pakistani weapons are under credible control. But obviously, they will keep up the pressure on you in order to extract further intrusion into your program, and also to deny you the non-discriminatory treatment which you require and which you want by trying to get into the NSG and other places. In order to justify that discrimination, they will keep up the pressure and keep up saying, oh, your weapons will go into the hands of terrorists. Our weapons are very safe, much safer than the Indians and many others. But this pressure will continue. To respond to the questions, with regard to Jaswant Singh, the dialogue with the US, we had a parallel dialogue at the same time, with the same agenda. This was after the nuclear explosions, 1998. The Security Council adopted Resolution 1172, which called for reversing the programs of both India and Pakistan. The US initiated bilateral dialogues with India and with Pakistan with the same agenda. We did not agree to the resolution. India did not agree to that resolution. We said there would be no reversal. India said there would be no reversal. But the US tried to work into this bilateral dialogue as to what could be done to contain the nuclear development in South Asia. And the idea was to restrain the missile and nuclear weapons program, etc., etc. Pakistan made a very important proposal in that context, which is called the mutual restraint regime, and that is still on the record. The Indians did not accept that. Anyway, this dialogue led eventually to our evolution of the 6.2 agenda with the Indians, and it led to a normalization of relations between the US and India. The Indians used the Jaswant Singh dialogue to very good purpose in order to evolve a new relationship with the US. Now, as far as whether Pakistan can revive that process, yes, we should try. I think it's always good to talk to a superpower like the United States. I don't think the conditions are the most propitious, but definitely our effort should continue to be to have a good relationship with the US. With China, there is an ongoing dialogue at various levels, and obviously in the current context, we need much greater clarity with regard to the level of Chinese strategic support to Pakistan. And that is something I hope that our government and our Foreign Office will be negotiating, will be talking to them about how to strengthen the Chinese strategic support to Pakistan in the current context. You mentioned 2002 and you mentioned Bombay, and I get the inference what you meant about the fact that there were terrorist attacks in India. I suppose that is what you were referring to. That's good. No, I understand. The fact of the matter is that if there are terrorist attacks, a country has got a choice. I mean, these terrorist attacks came from certain groups which were disaffected with the government in power at the time. These were groups who had also attacked the head of state of Pakistan. So there was a choice for the Indians to say, well, these are the same groups that are attacking your head of state and they've attacked us, so let's make a joint effort to try and tackle these groups and address the problem. Or they had a choice of saying, no, we blame you for a state-sponsored terrorism and this is what you've done to us and so we're going to go to war with you. This was the choice that the Indians had. And they made the choice of threatening war. And there were 10 months of a standoff on the border with billions of rupees spent by both sides. were two, at least, incidents where we almost came to a shooting war, which could have escalated to the nuclear level. And when the Indians understood that this could escalate to the nuclear level, this is when things began to cool down and they withdrew. So the question, when a terrorist attack happens, the question is, do you threaten war, or you try and address the problem and see how to solve it? Obviously, the Indians think that any attack that comes, or terrorist attack that comes, has got Pakistani government or military support. We presume the same thing as far as the Indians are concerned. I think we have to address this issue and to analyze exactly what is the problem of terrorism, how it emanates. It requires transparency, requires dialogue, requires discussion. It does not require threats of war. That's should be our position anyway.
Thank you very much. I think one last question. You wanted to ask a question, lady.
I had the question. Is somebody else going to ask a question?
No, this is the last question.
No, you.
Okay. Can I go ahead with my question?
Yeah, please.
I'm a molecular biologist and a stem cell biologist. I want to defend Dr. Aqib Khan. I have worked with him at Karachi University, where we have an institute. Making a bomb is really not a big deal. You see printouts everywhere, and if you have access to uranium, you get even a bright high school student can go and make a bomb. So Pakistan is being maligned for no reason whatsoever. And Pakistanis, by and large, consider Aqib Khan their protector and a hero. And no matter what one says about Indian goodwill, and I had a lot of goodwill about India at one point in my life because I was born in India. Lucknow is my home. And I still have no enmity towards the average Joe on the street in India. But Indian intentions about Pakistan are really, by and large, since the arrival of BJP and their military wings, are not anything to laugh about. My next question is, which is a technical one, that you said, if there is an Indian advancement into Pakistani territory, you can explode a bomb. The point is, how much damage will be mutual? Because radiation will spread far and wide, and this will be mutually assured destruction and not defense from Indian invasion.
I think we discussed Dr. Aqib Khan because the question was raised. We are being made to suffer because what is said by the Western countries that Dr. Aqib Khan proliferated. We have never said that he really proliferated. He's a great scientist, he's a great friend of mine, and we respect him. And he played a role. We are where we are. And the institute that he worked on, the Hukta Research Laboratory, is making a big contribution now to peaceful generation of electricity also. Thank you. And now we come to the end of this session. We are half an hour, more than half an hour behind the time as we started in. All I would like to say is I very much appreciate the excellent presentations. You have done so much research work on Pakistan by you and Dr. Ambassador Sahib. And it has been a pleasure really chairing this session. And thank you very much, Dr. Masuma Hassan, for inviting us to make this.
It was my pleasure, and this has been a fascinating panel discussion. I've really enjoyed it, so has everybody else. We are running rather late, but tea is served if anybody wants to have a cup of tea. And we will now settle down into the next session. And we should really break for lunch at 1 o'clock, at the most at 1:15.
How long is the tea?
First, I think I'd like to thank Dr. Masuma Hassan, Chairperson, for arranging such a wonderful conference. I think it was one of the best conferences that I have recently attended, and I think the credit goes to Dr. Masuma and to her team for having organized this, and also to the speakers. The previous session, of course, was excellent. I think it was most thought-provoking, and not only the previous one, but the ones all that we have been having here have been a source of great knowledge, and also would also, I think, give an impression of Pakistan to foreigners as well, that people in Pakistan, maybe the government is not thinking, but the people of Pakistan and the intellectuals of Pakistan are definitely contributing towards the problems that Pakistan, as a consequence of the sacrifices that have been made by our armed forces and our civilian population, which has been living in those areas, but yet it poses a threat, if not so much in terms of physical, but although there are casualties taking place every day, at least on the borders, but yet the major threat, of course, remains ideological. Before I hand over to the speakers, whom we have excellent speakers today, Dr. Rohan Gunaranta, Professor of Security Studies, Head of International Center for Political Violence and Terrorism. He is from the Rajaratnam School of International Studies in Singapore, and he unfortunately could not come, but you will be watching him on video. And then we have for terrorism, Lieutenant General Tariq. There cannot be a better and more appropriate person, because he has seen through the worst period, and especially the South Waziristan period. He has been the corps commander there and seen firsthand, so you will be listening to him. And then you will be, and then Mr. Rahimullah Yusufzai, who is the resident editor of the news, who is so well known in Pakistan, would be talking to the militants. The subject is that he will be talking about how to talk to the militants. And he is also by far one of the most experienced and knowledgeable people as far as terrorism is concerned. So I think before I hand them over, I'll just briefly mention a few points. First, I think we must understand that Pakistan military has undertaken some really very major military operations, both in South Waziristan, North Waziristan, and in the entire FATA region, and has made, as I said, great sacrifices. And as a consequence of that, today TTP more or less has been neutralized to a very large extent. It has been also factionalized and has found refuge in Afghanistan, and some of its top leaders are still there and keep sort of making, and India has given them protection, and for that reason I think the threat from Afghanistan still remains, but to a large extent has been contained. I think the credit goes clearly to General Sharif and General Bajwa for taking the very bold initiative which they did in order to counter this threat. This is today, I would say, just a holding phase of the operation, major work of rebuilding the devastated areas and rehabilitating the internally displaced people or persons still remains a major challenge. I think it's such a major challenge that the government should not neglect it. I think, and I feel that there is a great neglect in this area of how to rehabilitate them, how to rehabilitate them to a level of satisfaction, and how to also handle the challenge of the internally displaced people, and also the refugees of Afghanistan, how to deal with them, because that is also a great financial as well as a physical burden on Pakistan, but at the same time it is a matter which cannot be ignored, and that is of the human factor about the refugees. You cannot just push them into Afghanistan. You have to pursue a policy which is based on compassion as well as to understand the interests of both Afghanistan and Pakistan. And we also have to see that the military operation, as I said earlier in my presentation, linked with its economic and social problems are equally important. Unfortunately, the situation in Afghanistan continues to be very chaotic and very dangerous in the sense, and especially those areas which are adjacent to Pakistan, whether it is the south or the east of Afghanistan, they are still not under the control of the government, and for that reason, large areas, they say up to about 50% or 40% of the area is not under their control and under the control of Taliban, at least major portion of it, and that creates problems for Pakistan, because if they are not under control, and then India is also really creating problems for us by using that area and sending its Pakistan's problems remain quite serious and has to be on guard all the time. Now, we also have to understand the larger picture is that the larger security threat from militants facing Pakistan is multidimensional and too complex. We have 4 categories of militants. One, those who are globally oriented, work independently but also form alliances. In addition, there is an insurgency going on in Balochistan. So you can see the multidimensional aspect of the threats that Pakistan has been facing, and facing sometimes very successfully, but at the same time remains, all these threats continue to remain there despite the successes that we have made. Now, the other thing is that there is a potential emergence of the Islamic State or the IS cannot be ruled out. It is also called Daesh. There are unconfirmed reports that more than 15 to 20,000 volunteers from Pakistan, may be exaggerated, but were Syria and Iraq. And if that be true, even if less than that were there, the fact remains that these may return and exploit the weakness in Balochistan and Sindh, where there are ungoverned areas. So we have to be very careful and to see and to watch very closely as to how and where would they return. And will it be possible? Is it that easy to sort of monitor? Because they can easily slip in, and it's not that easy. But at the same time, those people and those areas from where they went, I think if the government is genuinely keen or desirous of really making sure that they do not create problems for Pakistan, it must take some steps, and I think that also threat to a large extent has been brought under control. The sectarian front lines, the proxy wars between the Iranians and the Arabs have acquired a new dimension as a matter of, as we see today, and it continues to unfold all the time. And the reason for that is that the Iranian and the Arab conflict and its spillover effect in Pakistan and in other parts of this region will be there. And it also has a dimension in the sense that it can hurt Pakistan. The external volatility can have internal repercussions. Then, as was said earlier, the line of control and working boundary has acquired a new life of its own, continuous firing all the time, and that also creates problems. So what I was trying to say was the case have, in fact, as far as the terrorism is concerned, as far as security is concerned, and these are aspects which also cannot be ignored. Because these countries at one time, thankfully, it has to a very large extent been reduced, have been using their proxies in Pakistan to advance their agendas. I would, to save time, I will just make one or two other points and then, presentations. One is, I would like to say that Pakistan has been a victim of terrorism, and its military installations, its intelligence and government buildings, and everywhere you see, even till today, all the security is still very tight. And one of the reasons is that we cannot afford to take chances. Whereas the security has improved considerably, but at the same time, the very fact that we have to take preventive measures on such a high scale by itself is indicative that the threat is there and could emerge if our guard is not that strong. That is very important. And I would also like to mention that it is extremely important that ultimately we have to find a political solution to militancy. And once we have been able to sort of control this situation and brought about a certain level of peace within Pakistan, and we feel confident from inside, I think the government and the military would be in a position to negotiate with the militants with a position of strength. Because ultimately we have to rehabilitate these people in our society, and in order to do that, it is important that we win the military battle. That we have. So now we have to rehabilitate those who are prepared and willing to be brought back into the society, and those whom we think are incorrigible, and that certain specific measures and a certain policy should be made regarding them. I think to a large extent the government has made a certain policy, but whether it is implementing that faithfully or not is a big question. So all these aspects, I'm sure, will be very much covered in the next 3 presentations, and I would request to begin with he's here.
to present on the IS-centric threat in South Asia, focusing on Pakistan and Afghanistan. Ladies and gentlemen, 14 extremist and terrorist groups in Afghanistan and Pakistan have pledged allegiance to the so-called Islamic State. And I want to share with you that these groups are located in Afghanistan and they are located in Pakistan. And we also have groups outside Afghan-Pakistan region operating in the Maldives, in Sri Lanka, in India, in Bangladesh, and also in the disputed Kashmir region. My research into Pakistan and Afghanistan began in 1993 when I first visited Pakistan. Terrorism Ground Zero with one of my students, Quran Iqbal, who is now at the National Defense University. Let me focus and share with you that these are the groups that are primarily involved in two functions. One is in radicalizing South Asians to join IS. They disseminate propaganda and they recruit. They raise funds, procure ingredients, make bombs and guns, and conduct terrorist attacks. They want to destabilize this region and they want to bring IS to this region. Let me also share with you another very important aspect about these groups. If you look at the groups in Afghanistan, the groups in Afghanistan emerged more recently. They emerged after IS first established a presence in the tribal areas of Pakistan. But today the groups in Pakistan have in many ways grown, but also new groups have emerged in Afghanistan. These groups have pledged allegiance to Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, the so-called Caliph. What is important for you to know is that this Afghanistan-Pakistan region is called Khorasan. That is IS's number of provinces. The provinces in Nigeria, in Algeria, in Libya, in Egypt, in Saudi Arabia and Yemen, and also in Caucasus. And they also established one in Khorasan. So these belong to the Khorasan region. But now, let me explain to you very clearly that of these groups that are operating, what we are seeing is that these groups have expanded in strength, size and number. There are a total of 2,000 Pakistanis and Afghans who have traveled to Syria and Iraq. They have joined the IS network, and there are about another 3,000 people who are supporting IS in Pakistan and Afghanistan. These are active supporters. So in many ways, we can say that about 5,000 Afghans and Pakistanis support IS. Previously, the main support base was the Taliban and Al-Qaeda. But today, the Taliban and Al-Qaeda still has strength, both Afghan Taliban and Pakistan Taliban, but also IS. So there's a new player that has emerged. These groups in Afghanistan and Pakistan have mounted over 200 attacks. Very significant. Every day they are planning and preparing attacks, and every week there are a few attacks that are staged. These attacks are both in rural Pakistan and urban Pakistan, rural Afghanistan and urban Afghanistan. Those who are joining IS are from the rural areas, but increasingly from the urban areas. They come from the middle class, very well educated, doctors, engineers, accountants, also women. And I want to share with you that because of their skill set and co-competence, they are operating in cyberspace. So encrypted social media is their main domain of communication, for recruitment, for fundraising, and operational planning. And I want to say that Telegram is their favorite mode. If you look at the Pakistan landscape, in Pakistan, IS is strong in the following areas: in Balochistan, in Mustok, and in Kalat, and in Utsa. And other than that, we have seen in Punjab, in Lahore, in Sialkot and in Multan. And also in Sindh, both in Karachi and in interior Sindh, including Singapore and Hyderabad. In Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, we have seen very significant growth of IS, including in Peshawar. In FATA, we have seen growth in Roksar agency, in Khyber agency, especially in the PIIA Valley. PIIA Valley links into Afghanistan, where IS is very strong in Mamnoon, in the east of Afghanistan. In fact, there is a corridor where there is movement of men and material. We have also seen pockets of IS in Nuristan and Kunat, both in northeast, as well as in different parts of Afghanistan, Zabul, Kabul and Kunduz. So IS is on a trajectory of growth, not a trajectory of decline. We have seen that IS also has taken a severe beating, but it's a very resilient organization. The first IS leader, Hussain Khan Hussain, who was formerly the head of Taliban Pakistan, who crossed over to IS, he was killed. Most recently, the IS leader who was killed was Maulvi Abdul Hasib Logar, and he was killed in Nangarhar, Afghanistan on April 27, 2017. So IS has a presence, IS footprint is vibrant, IS faces many challenges from Al-Qaeda and Taliban, both Afghan Taliban and Pakistan Taliban, but IS continues to grow. Let me also share with you that Pakistan has to develop a very comprehensive strategy to fight IS. There are three methods. One is increase the capabilities of intelligence services, especially the police intelligence, to fight terrorism. Military intelligence should continue to maintain their capabilities, and other than that, intelligence services itself, both ISI and IB, should be given more capabilities to fight this threat, because IS is not going to go away. IS will destabilize Pakistan society, a very beautiful society that has a very different outlook to those who are from the Arab world, very open, very tolerant. But unfortunately, these extremist ideologies are now entering Pakistan and Afghanistan, especially with the Arabs coming in. Let me also share with you that the capabilities should not be only to catch or kill IS members, not only the kinetic and the tactical response. 80% of the response, 80% of the budget should be to prevent extremism. That is to promote moderation, toleration and coexistence, to preserve Buddhism, Hinduism, Christianity and other pockets of other religions in Pakistan, and make sure that the Muslims continue to mingle and mix with these other communities. So there should be an element of coexistence. This element of coexistence doesn't exist when it comes to Al-Qaeda and IS and Taliban, these extreme and terrorist organizations. Taliban destroyed the Mamnoon images. So you can see the mindset of these extremists. They're very brutal and very cruel. I myself have interviewed a very large number of these members, including Mullah Mutawakil, the Taliban foreign minister, who was a disaster of the first order. So I want to share with you that these groups must be eliminated and these threats must be contained. Pakistan cannot work with these groups. Pakistan works these groups, Pakistan itself will suffer. So Pakistan must take a very tough and a strong position with regard to these groups. But the key is to prevent the Pakistani population from being politicized, radicalized and militarized by these extremist ideologies. Key is to keep Pakistanis in the mainstream. Key is to work with the religious organization, education organization, media organizations to promote the message of moderation, toleration and coexistence. The area where Pakistan has failed and is extremely weak is it has no structured rehabilitation program. I had helped Pakistan in 2008 to build a rehabilitation program. It started in 2009. But this program is now largely in the military. The police should build education authorities, they should bring the universities on board and provide religious rehabilitation, educational rehabilitation, vocational rehabilitation, social and family rehabilitation, and also psychological rehabilitation. In addition to that, creative arts in rehabilitation, song, dance, music, puppetry, literature, for which Pakistan is very famous. Pakistan should not follow the desert dwelling culture of the Middle East. They must promote a rich culture. Then, of course, Pakistan should have programs in recreation, sports, bring their best sports stars to prison. So those who are captured, they should be rehabilitated. Otherwise, when they are released, they will become a threat. They will regenerate more terrorists, and also they will be hailed as heroes. So it is crucial for institutions of higher learning to work with the government, both in prevention and in rehabilitation programs. Government should, of course, persist in the military, law enforcement, and intelligence approaches, but the soft approach of fighting terrorism and extremism should be largely with the communities and the non-military organizations, non-law enforcement organizations of government, and working together with government. Pakistan is a beautiful country, and it is up to you to defend your nation, to work very closely with government, to influence government, to support government, to ensure that your country is free from extremism and terrorism. I wish each one of you good luck. Thank you.
Thank you.
And the world was devastated. Nations of the world got together, got into a huddle, made laws, legislation, rules, regulations, studied, analyzed, put resources there because everyone's heart was bleeding for the humanity that was lost to terrorism. And that's how it should have been. But the same year, 190,000 people died because of drug abuse. There were 6 million people who died because of alcohol and smoking, tobacco. 9 million died because of malnutrition, out of which 2.5 million were children. The world never said anything about this. So I have my doubts about the bleeding hearts for humanity. There's a big contradiction here. Ladies and gentlemen, I'll be speaking to you. I'll make it short and sweet. You have a choice between what I have to say and having lunch. I suggest get the lunch. Terrorism is something which has been spoken about all over the world, and I'm sure you understand it very well. So I'll only come up with some of the conclusions that are of interest to you. I would like to begin by thanking Dr. Masuma and the Pakistan Institute of International Affairs for inviting me here. I'm a little overwhelmed by the intellect that is under one roof here before me. With 37 years of military experience, this is something I was not accustomed to. So, the other thing is people have mentioned twice now that I'm an expert on terrorism. Ladies and gentlemen, let me assure you, the only expert in terrorism is a terrorist, and I'm not one. I only confronted it, and I can bring my experiences here to this room. So that's what I will be doing. But coming back to terrorism, before we discuss terrorism, we at least need to define it. And here I might surprise you, that the whole world, after being subjected to terrorism for so many years, have not yet been explanation. So I take you back to those 26,000 or 25,500 casualties, and this conflict and contradiction. Does the world really want to define terrorism? And what has the International Court for Justice said, and I would like to quote Rosalind Higgins. She says, that terrorism is a term without any legal significance. It is merely a convenient way of alluding to actions taken whether of states or of individuals, widely disapproved of, and in which either the methods used are unlawful or the targets protected, or both. Now this implies there is no definition. We don't really know what terrorism is. It is violence across the board. Somewhere it's a freedom struggle. Somewhere it is violence just for the criminal kind of mind that sets in. But the world has put together some points, you might say, as to what is terrorism and what is not terrorism. So let's see what the United Nations says. What is terrorism? It is the use of violence in pursuit of political, ideological, or religious change. It can be committed by non-state actors or undercover agents on behalf of their governments. It reaches more than the target victims and affects larger spectrums of society. It is illegal by legislation as well as being immoral. This is what is considered to be terrorism. It is ambiguous. It has nuances in it. It is politically biased. It can be used for political gains of different countries. We'll discuss that in a while. They've also said what terrorism is not. They say war or peacetime violence committed by one nation state against another nation state, regardless of legality or illegality, carried out by uniform forces or legal competence of such states, is not terrorism. Reasonable act of self-defense is not terrorism. A legitimate targets in war is not, or against enemy competence is not terrorism, and collateral damage is not terrorism. But why have I said this to you? You're not really interested in terrorism in that way. Here is where I want to give you my conclusion about terrorism. Terrorism today in the world, in my, I might say, unqualified opinion, is a conflict or competition between various intelligence agencies that govern, regulate, and pull their own weak governments by the nose, direct, and form policies. And the chaos that they create is actually the ways why diplomacy as a product of this terrorism is what they're trying to do. If you go to any intelligence agency now, whether it is ISI, CIA, RAW, NDS, Mossad, whatever, and tell them that, look, why don't you cool down? They say, how can we take unilateral action? If we do that, we are going to create space for others to increase this kind of terrorist activity in our own country. So it's both an act of self-defense as well as an act of aggression. But it is being done by every single intelligence agency of the world. And if anyone has any doubts in this, I can give you a lot of proof and evidence on it. So whoever you see, whether it's a separatist movement or it is some kind of a sectarian issue which we'll discuss, these are all small events which provide intrusion to hostile agencies to exploit. And therefore, what we are seeing is a global war which is being undertaken by other means. And it has to be addressed as such. It cannot be addressed by, cherry picking an incident or an event like that. Now, we come to Pakistan. Pakistan, why do we have terrorism in Pakistan? Why did we have terrorism in Pakistan? Did it start at 9/11? It started with the assassination of Liaqat Ali Khan. It was there in 1956 at the Ahmadiyya riots, and Justice Munir report very clearly tells you what it was. In 94, we lost 40 people in Malakand because of the TSNM. In 99, 2000, there were about something like 220 riots in the country. 83 cities were affected. 220 people died and 2,000 were wounded. We had terrorism long before 9/11. Now, why do we have terrorism? Why does a country like Pakistan have terrorism? If you really want to put your finger on it, you may not agree with me. We just not had governance. We just don't have a government. We never really had one. What passes off as government is something that goes on, but on the ground there is no government. We don't know how to regulate our garbage. We can't even control our traffic. We don't know how to do anything, anywhere. And when we don't do that, how do we really justify controlling a man with a purpose and a mic and running down the road, radicalizing society? How can we explain this? Where has the government ever really been visible? It's conspicuous in its absence. And that's why we have terrorism. Now when we look at terrorism today, after 9/11, and the way we explain it is that we've sacrificed 70,000 people and we've had $130 billion worth of expenses. But that's not the reflection of what we've done. That's the wrong way of saying it. We have done some achievements which the world has failed to do. 38 countries, a coalition of 38 countries fluctuating up and down in Afghanistan, have failed to do what they had set out to do. We set out to clear 48,000 square kilometers of space, and we did it. We cleared 3,500 kilometers of lines of communication. We traveled freely in our own areas. When the Peshawar airport was shut down, when the Indus highway was closed, when the tunnel was not available to the people going from Kohat, when the government was shifting to Ahmedabad, when businesses were moving out of Peshawar, people said that, Pakistan is fighting for its survival. That's when we started fighting. Today, all of this is not there. I used to put down my signatures for how do you measure success in a specific area. Do you control the roads? Have you established the debt of the government? Are the entrances and exits controlled by you? Are you popular with the people? If you can check mark these 4 things, you're winning. And we could check mark most of the places like this. And we did this. We took 2.5 million people out of a valley, put them into a camp, gave them smart cards, established schools for their children, and in 3 months cleared the valley and put them back into their houses. The world could not do it to 3.5 million refugees from Afghanistan for 40 years. We did it in 3 months. These are the things that we did, but our story doesn't get told anywhere. So we have to listen to Pakistan doing more and more, and I've been now involved in a lot of these discussions, and we can take some questions on it if you want to, but I don't want to get into details now because there's a question of what I have to say in the lunch that you have to eat, the lunch meals. So, what kind of terrorism do we have in Pakistan? There's ethnicity, there's sectarian, there's political, there's ideological, there's some against minorities, there's crime. We have a lot of informal parallel stuff going on. We have an informal economy which is larger than the formal economy. We have parallel constitutions which are approved. We have parallel courts, different kinds of ways that judgments are done. We have to address all of this. So if we don't do it, I don't think we will be able to address this issue of violence in the country if the government doesn't step up to the block and starts doing its responsibility. What are those responsibilities? It has to reform the judiciary. You can't have this judicial system and then deal with this violence in the same manner. You can't expect the military to come in and establish courts because you don't have confidence in your own courts. It's not a military requirement. It's a political requirement. These courts must stop, and we must be able to empower the judiciary and give them a system in which something can work in this manner. You can't function, implement law and regulate it with a politicized police. You just cannot. It has to be depoliticized. It cannot be answerable to chief ministers and governors. It has to function on something like what the army functions. If you don't depoliticize the police, you cannot implement the law even if you have the law, which you don't at this moment. We need to do some madrasa reforms. We can't have a parallel education system. We've got to have a complete national education system, whether we like it or not, but we're going to teach our children how to live in peace. We can't give them a syllabus how to live in hate and misery. So this has to happen. We've got to activate NAP, and we have to do the nectar. I was involved in putting the nectar together, and within 48 hours of presenting it to the government, they knocked down everything that we put inside it. And therefore they made it completely toothless, and it will not deliver if you don't empower it the way that we thought that it should be empowered. Obviously the education system and the syllabus needs to be looked at. That has to be totally changed. If we don't take these steps, we will not be able to take on terrorism. There is no military solution for terrorism. Military solutions create a space for the rest to move in. Development, capacity building, education, etc. We heard about de-radicalization centers. I've seen those de-radicalization centers. You take a man from the fighting line, put him into a de-radicalization center, put on a fancy cap and waistcoat on him and give him a sewing machine and teach him how to sew. And after 6 months, give him a pat on the back and say he's de-radicalized and put him back in a radicalized society. Does it make sense? The source is a radicalized society. The source is not the radicalized individual on the street. So how do you de-radicalize society? We need to actually discuss that on a much more detailed manner. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'll leave it at this, and I hope for some searching questions, because there is so much to terrorism that one can talk about, and at 10-15 minutes is never going to be enough. So I'd rather address the questions that you may have than to give you what my own views are only. Thank you.
Insurgents during the Maoist insurgency were drilling their opponents in the feet. I thought it's mild compared to what happened here in Afghanistan and Pakistan. I know the Afghan Mujahideen were drilling into the head, and then they were putting hot oil in the heads, and they used to say that it makes the head dance, so they used to enjoy that. In Pakistan there have been beheadings, and we know about videos which are available that the militants are playing with the heads like football. And these are easily available, all these videos. I don't think there's any support for peace talks with militants now in Pakistan, especially after the terrorist attack on the Army Public School in Peshawar in December 2014, in which 147 persons were killed, including 132 school children. But in neighboring Afghanistan, every stakeholder wants to talk to the Afghan Taliban. This is due to our different experiences in dealing with the militants. We also know the Afghan government and the US have been trying to start a peace process, but on their own terms. There's a broad support for peace with Taliban in Afghanistan. Both President Ashraf Ghani and Dr. Abdullah, who contested against each other in 2014, they promised peace and peace talks with Taliban. We all know Ghani was able to strike a peace agreement with the Hizb-e-Islami Hikmatyar. It was a truly, as we say, Afghan-led, Afghan-owned peace process, because Afghans were talking to Afghans. There were no outside mediators. That kind of a peace process is required. There are challenges of implementing that peace accord, but the fact that it was achieved after 2 years of negotiations was an achievement. But it's going to be much more challenging to persuade the much stronger Afghan Taliban to talk and make a deal. We have several examples in South Asia of both successful and failed peace processes. In Nepal, armed communists joined the mainstream, and their leader Prachanda even became the Prime Minister twice. In India, Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi concluded peace agreement with the Mizoram militants in 1986, and Prime Minister Modi with Nagaland militants in 2015. The Sri Lankan experience is different, as a military solution was found after nearly 30 years of war. But as we heard yesterday from Mr. Jihan Pereira of Sri Lanka, Now let me focus on Pakistan's experience of talking to the militants. Pakistan has suffered, as we heard so many times, every kind of conflict in the last 70 years, ethnic, linguistic, religious, sectarian, separatist. And talks were held to resolve some of these issues. East Pakistan was separated, Balochistan unrest continues, FATA is far from stable. It's difficult to negotiate with armed groups which have foreign linkages and support, as they are manipulated by the anti-Pakistan forces. This is now the case with the TTP, Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, and its allied faction, and also with certain Baloch separatists, even though I must admit there is support in Pakistan for talking to the Baloch separatists. And efforts have been made to negotiate with the Baloch separatists. The previous Chief Minister, Dr. Abdul Malik Baloch, also went to UK and he met Khan of Kalat, Mir Sulaiman Dawood, and also some others. There have been efforts to talk to Brahmada Bukti in Switzerland. So, efforts have been made. They have stopped now because when I met Mir Sulaiman Dawood and Harbiyar Murray in London, they wanted international guarantees before they can agree to talk to the Pakistan government. And they wanted to negotiate only with the military establishment, not with the politicians. But I don't think there's any support for having peace talks with the Afghanistan-based groups like the TTP, Jamaatul Harar, Lashkar-e-Islam of Mangalbagh, and never with Daesh. Now, let me refresh your memory. There have been 16 major military operations starting from Al-Mizan in 2002 to Zarb-e-Azab in June 2014 and Radul Fasad, the last one in February this year. There were 4 operations in Swat alone, including 3 phases of Rai-Haq and the big one, Rahi-Rast, in May 2009. These operations were given very interesting Urdu, Pashto, English names. For example, the Pashto names were really very fascinating, I must say. Daraglam is a Pashto word, which means I am coming after you. Bya Daraglam, I am again coming after you. And Khwakh Badisham, all these Pashto words, we use them in our common, language. Khwakh Badisham means I will sort you out. This kind of names were given. But also there were English names, Thunderbolt or something like that, and Sher Dil and Dazla, and I have a list of these operations. But we had 16 military operations and maybe not 16 but about a dozen peace accords, which were made secretly, mostly through tribal elders by our military and our intelligence agencies. But I will just explain in a while about some of these major peace agreements made with the militants. And you will see that they were largely in favor of the militants because these were negotiated mostly from position of weakness. Now Pakistan is much stronger due to military operations, support of the nation to these operations. So Pakistan, in the unlikely event of peace talks, can talk from the position of strength. I won't even call them peace talks, henceforth. We can say this will be kind of a surrender because the militants have to surrender and then it's up to the state to forgive them or punish them. I'll talk about PML and peace talks with the TTP in the end. Now, some of these major peace agreements, the first one was signed in a place called Shakai. It's called Shakai Peace Agreement in South Waziristan. And it was made again after the government forces suffered losses in the military action. Nek Mohammad Wazir, you may remember him, he was the first major Pakistani Taliban commander. He refused to surrender foreign militants, even though he had promised. But this agreement was mostly verbal, which is again strange. He was killed in June 2004, so the agreement collapsed. promises were made according to the agreement. He did not register foreign militants. Attacks on government did not stop. The TTP got many favors. They got their prisoners released. Compensation was paid to the militants, tribesmen for property losses. Even in the media even reported that funds were given to these commanders to pay their Al-Qaeda debts. They had taken loan from Al-Qaeda and that was repaid. Never confirmed, by the way. Another major agreement was in February 2005, Sararova. This is a place in south of Waziristan. It was signed directly with Baitullah Masood, the founder of the TTP, in December 2007. So this agreement was made when more than 200 Pakistani soldiers were captured by Baitullah Masood, in a major setback, I must say. And then this deal actually favored Baitullah Masood because he had the upper hand at that time. So there was no laying down of arms by his men, no required to stop attacking government installation and sheltering foreigners, guest fighters, so-called guest fighters. This agreement was not binding, by the way, so there was no monitoring mechanism put in place. Nobody was fined, no action was taken against violators. Let me talk about the North Waziristan Peace Agreement signed in September 2006 by Governor Lieutenant General Ali Muhammad Khan Aurangzeb, Ali Muhammad Jan Aurangzeb under President Musharraf. This agreement was even publicly criticized by President Bush. And Musharraf had to take General Aurangzeb to the US to explain it to the Bush administration. It was a 16-point, most comprehensive peace agreement. We have copies of that. And this was signed with Hafiz Gul Bahadur and the whole tribal elders were involved. They promised, the militants promised there will be no target killings, no parallel administration, no Sharia courts, no attacks on government installations and cross-border attacks in Afghanistan, no intrusion into the adjoining districts. They promised that the foreigners will either leave or remain peaceful under guarantees by the Jirgas. They promised to return the captured government property and vehicles and resolve disputes under the FCR, under the government regulation. In return, Taliban prisoners were freed, new roadside checkposts were removed on the demand of the militants. This was an improvement on the previous one because now they had a monitoring mechanism. A 10-member Aman or Peace Committee was set up to monitor the agreement, but this committee was ineffective in the face of the very strong, in the militant group in their stronghold. The deal, as predicted, collapsed. The militants did not even fulfill one condition. The SWAT agreement, now this agreement was negotiated by politicians, by the ANP and People's Party government, unlike the other, which were negotiated by the army directly. But there was an oversight by the army, and the politicians used to go and talk to Maulana Fazlullah and his men, and there used to be somebody from the military accompanying them in SWAT and in Peshawar. But this agreement, soon there were disagreements and attacks began again on government installations, schools, video shops. They captured Buner and Shangla districts while moving out of SWAT. The agreement was scrapped and Raya Haq military operation was launched by the army. Yet another SWAT peace agreement was signed by Maulana Sufi Muhammad, who is the father-in-law of Maulana Fazlullah. Sufi Muhammad is now in jail and Fazlullah is in Afghanistan. This agreement also collapsed. One more very important peace agreement was about to be made in Bajor, but it was sabotaged by the US drone strike in Damadola. You remember 84 persons, almost all young madrasa students, ages from 10 to 20 were killed. Musharraf, for whatever reason, falsely claimed that the attack was made by the Pakistan Air Force. This was a drone attack, And soon afterwards, we saw that the first major suicide attack in Pakistan took place in Dargai in Malakand district, killing 42 soldiers. Now, I'm trying to raise some questions. Can all these militants be killed, especially if they are beyond Pakistani law in Afghanistan? We hear there are about 1,000 Pakistanis, based in Afghanistan, mostly in the 3 border provinces, Nangarhar, Kunar and Nuristan. Will Kabul and the US cooperate and Pakistan reciprocate in going after each other's enemies? This is the question right now being debated. Is there any chance of amnesty not for the leaders but for foot soldiers who didn't commit major acts of terrorism? Can Ehsanullah Ehsan, the former spokesman of TTP and Jamaatul Ahrar, be forgiven? We know that one parent of the APS Army Public School tragedy has gone to the Peshawar High Court, saying that the court should direct the government of Pakistan not to give amnesty to Ehsanullah Ehsan. When you talk to the military official, they say that Ehsan was very useful in promoting Pakistan's cause by linking TTP, Jamaatul Ahrar with the NDS, the National Directorate of Security, the Afghan intelligence, and with RAW, Indian RAW. We also know that some TTP, Lashkar-e-Islam is a small group led by Mangal Bagh, also based in Afghanistan. They are surrendered quietly. We know about Ehsan, but we don't know about Halim Khan and others who have surrendered. And this is part of the military strategy to trigger defections from the rank of the militants to weaken them. Again, the question is, will our nation accept amnesty for such people? Now, let me come to my main thrust, and this is, PML government's peace talks in early 2014. I was part of the 4-member government committee. The format was wrong. We were holding talks openly, unlike the secret talks held by the military earlier. It brought negotiators under pressure in the glare of the media. There were no real preparations made for the peace talks. In fact, we never had a meeting before the peace talks. The process lasted just 2.5 months. These were indirect talks, by the way. There was only one direct face-to-face meeting with the TTP leaders, Shura, in Orakzai agency. And in that meeting also, both sides just presented their positions. There were no negotiations. The TTP committee had Maulana Samiullah of JUIS, Professor Ibrahim of Jamaat Islami, Maulana Abdul Aziz of Lal Masjid, the Red Mosque. He was so rigid. In the very first meeting he said the committee should declare Sharia in Pakistan. He said, how can we do that? We have no powers. So he was sidelined gradually. He never took part in the process. He was replaced by Maulana Yusuf Shah of the Samiullah group of JUIS. The government committee was led by Irfan Sadiqi, advisor to the Prime Minister, Rustam Shah Moman, former ISI official Major Amir, and myself. As someone said very rightly, there was no government in the government committee and no Taliban in the Taliban committee. We were powerless. We couldn't decide anything. We asked that a federal minister should be part of the committee, the interior minister. Nobody agreed. We later quit. I actually, 3 of us quit, and the government committee got new members. Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif was keen to have peace talks as he had promised during the 2013 election campaign, and the PTI chief Imran Khan too wanted this. This was rare for them to agree on something. They agreed that there should be peace talks, and no party actually openly opposed the peace talks. Most Pakistanis, I believe, wanted a peaceful solution. Nawaz Sharif is very fond of talking in terms of percentages. And we found this out when we had our first meeting with him. He asked us in terms of percentages, the chances of success of the peace talks. My 3 colleagues said that they were very hopeful. They said 50% plus are the chances of success. I was the last one sitting in the row. I said less than 10%. He was really very upset. He asked me why, because he had actually pushed me to become part of the committee. I said the military is not fully on board. You can't have peace talks without the military. Secondly, the TTP has got huge differences. TTP was formed by various armed factions in December 2007. They never We asked for an Army ISI briefing, but we were not given any briefing. The execution of 23 Frontier Corps soldiers in captivity for 4 years by TTP Moman, which later became Jamaatul Ahrar, caused the collapse of the pretense of peace talks and final preparations for Zarb-e-Azam. Now, let me also say, just about to finish this, the government did not give any ground to TTP in those brief talks. Ceasefire was announced, but by the TTP, not by the government. Although the government stopped military airstrikes. TTP gave us a long list of prisoners which they wanted released, but the government did not release anyone from this list. Some were released, but there was without building consensus, without proper homework. Otherwise, these are doomed to fail. The military, we all know, is ascendant in all security matters. So politicians have to be careful making independent decisions in these matters. Thank you.
Thank you. I think.
Thank you. My name is Talat A. Presided. I teach international relations currently at IOBM. My question is, I think we talked about terrorism and how to deal with the problem. I read a very good article recently which says that terrorism is being used by states as their, statecraft or normal method of dealing with other nations. We have example of Gulbhushan Yadav, so that's kind of smoking gun that we have. India also accuses us of this, but what surprised me recently is the increasing evidence to show that ISIS has US and Israeli support. They created tent hospitals on the border between Iraq and Syria, and the Israeli doctors were treating them. 2 aircrafts were shot down about 2 years back in Iraq, and they were full of ammunition. And after investigation, the Iraqi army found, it was not publicized too much, they found that those were NATO aircrafts taking weapons for Daesh. So and I have tremendous evidence because I'm planning to write on this. I'm collecting evidence, and this is credible evidence. We can take steps within the country to control terrorism, but what do we do about this variety of terrorism?
Good, thank you. We'll take 2 or 3 questions and then we'll... Please. Okay, I'll go deep.
I have 2 quick questions. One is, the drone program has been very controversial in this country, but it's viewed elsewhere as being very effective at decapitating militant leadership. So I'd like to get the views on how effective you think has been at that level, even though there's been considerable collateral damage. The second question relates to the issue of that's been raised frequently here about how underdevelopment has contributed to terrorism. If we back engineer that question, so what is it that contributes to underdevelopment? One key argument that is made elsewhere is that the military, by allocating so much resources to itself, it has contributed to Pakistan's underdevelopment. So it is both the cause and at the same time, is it the cause of underdevelopment in this country?
Briefly,
one question.
Right. I really appreciate Rahimullah Saab for mentioning Bajor. because a lot of times as Pakistanis we forget they were children too of this nation, and I think understanding that from that perspective and how that has fueled, unfortunately, the fight. And I really appreciate General Saab for mentioning the grand scale of how important terrorism is versus other causes that are really damaging humanity. I think this is very important. But one thing that we've noticed even in the presentation, there was mentioning of Sharia. There was mentioning of the religious context. And that has always fueled the militants and the terrorists. As a response to that, and you mentioned in the committee, yes, there was no federal minister, but there was no religious scholar either. Is there any way to combat that narrative? Because that is the fuel that's fueling them. And if you could add some light to that, because you mentioned preventive care instead of curative care, and I think that's very important. And one of the elements is religion. When you had a Pew Research study that said 98% of this country, they did a research saying that they would like Sharia to be influential in its lawmaking. This is so on this issue, what is the counter response or you feel that it's important or not to have that? Thank you.
Yeah. Is it on?
Can you hear me? Yeah. All right. The first issue was related to how do we deal with this international globalization of terror and states perpetuating terror through their own other means. I actually noted it down and I was going to give a suggestion, but I didn't because it's too utopian. But I feel that if you are going to really deal with it, we have to have a mechanism put in place at an international level at least, in which the intelligence agencies are monitored, supervised and regulated. I don't expect this to happen just straight off the bat, but I would strongly recommend that we take a regional initiative for joint intelligence at some stage. And if we do this, we'll be able to at least protect ourselves from it. But this is going to be there, and unless it is corrected, terrorism is not going to go away. The issue was related to drones. The question you want to talk about the drones, the matter about drones is basically, I really, it could be helpful, cannot be helpful. I was involved in a substantial part of the space. There was never a drone attack in the areas where I was. I feel that the drone attack is an outcome of sovereignty and non-sovereignty more than the drone attack itself. Pakistan has to establish sovereignty in spaces where there are drone attacks. That means that nobody from abroad also is allowed to be there. You cannot have war initiated from those spaces. If you do that, then the drone attacks are going to be a national outcome. Out of the 48,000 square kilometers, 35,000 was with me. There was no drone attack in that area and I stayed the longest. And I didn't tolerate any foreigner out there. So I suppose that is one answer I could give you. About your question on the military never attributes funds to itself, it's the parliament which does it. And the parliament has allowed us 3% of the GDP. And do something else, most welcome, but 3% of the GDP is what is actually given as the natural thing. So it's not the military which defines it.
Regarding the drone attacks, we agree that the drone attacks have taken out a number of important Pakistani and Taliban leaders and also some in Afghanistan. So this is a fact. And in fact, I think 80% of the drone attacks take place with the agreement and cooperation and intelligence sharing of Pakistan. This is what we have been told. But Pakistani complaint earlier was that the Americans don't target those in which Pakistan is interested, and that they target the Haqqani network or the Afghan Taliban or Al-Qaeda or PIIA or whatever. That was the complaint, but I think now in recent months or recent years that has been resolved. So now there is more intelligence sharing and cooperation, and we know that the mastermind of the Peshawar school attack, Khalifa Umar Mansoor, was killed by a drone attack in Afghanistan. Baitullah Masood, Hakimullah Masood, Qari Hussain, Mullah Nazir, all of them were killed in Pakistan by the drone attacks. So that is a fact. But you also know Pakistan has been asking for the drone technology from the US. Development is a reason for terrorism or militancy. If you look at the areas where there has been militancy for the last 15, 16 years, those are the most underdeveloped in Pakistan. FATA, if you look at the socio-economic indicators, it's the most underdeveloped area in Pakistan, lacking political, economic, social, legal rights. So that is a contributing factor, but I think there are also other factors. It's not poverty alone, not underdevelopment. There are also other reasons why there is militancy. The Bajawal drone strike, it has to be mentioned. It was unforgivable. They killed 84 people, and I was there within hours of the attack, and I met the families, and they were studying in a madrasa, but they were not terrorists, they were very young. And there were 3 teachers who were killed, and the rest were all children. And that, Mr. Musharraf, General Musharraf saying, no, we have done this. It's the Pakistani Air Force, which was, false. And now he's saying, yes, we allowed the Americans to carry out drone attacks. Now he's admitting all these facts. But that was, there were 2 major events which contributed to the rise of militancy in Pakistan. One was this Bajawar drone strike. Second was the Red Mosque, Lal Masjid military operation. After that, the militants became more radicalized, and this very brutal group in Mamnoon agency led by Abdul Wali Umar Khalid Khurasani, who executed 23 frontier court soldiers, as I mentioned earlier. This group was then formed, and they were the most brutal, and this contributed to that thing, I think. Demand for Sharia, what was the mandate of this government committee? It was to try and strike a conversation and then take guidance from the government. We were asking the government there should be a government minister, preferably interior minister, also minister for religious affairs. This was one of our ideas, but nobody was bothered. I think the government was doing it in a half-hearted way. They were not taking ownership of the peace talks. They put us, in the front line to negotiate with us. But who were we? Did we have a mandate? Did we have any power? So that was actually, they were just trying to fulfill the promise made during the election campaign. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll just touch 2 points. One is the resources which are allocated to the military. I think when you have a very serious situation, as we were facing, the military has to get resources. But that is vulnerable to terrorism. So I think it's very important to balance your budget. And I think when you have very scant resources, it becomes even more challenging for the government to really allocate its resources in such a balanced way. But I think that aspect should not be ignored. Then, as far as drones are concerned, they may be effective in terms of killing terrorists, but at the same time there is another very important aspect, and that is the sovereignty of the country. Does it not hurt the sovereignty of the country? Does it not make it look small in the eyes of its own people, that it is unable to sort of control events within the country? I think this aspect also cannot be overlooked. Yeah, I had promised somebody, please, and then Aapko.
My name is Dr. Mushtaq Nirvana. Enough has been said about terrorism, and enough has been said about how things have been controlled and what planned. What is the actual motto behind the terrorism, and what are the roles of Taliban in terrorism? Number 1. And number 2, is it linked with the nuclear powers, degradations, or does it hurt us the nuclear powers in one way or another? Thank you very much.
One observation for General Tariq and one for Mr. Yusufzai. General Tariq, you in your presentation blamed much of the ills that Pakistan suffers on the lack of government in this country. As we know, the military has been in command of this country for more than half of its history. And I was wondering if you might have something to say about the missed opportunities by the military itself when it was in firm command of the government to do something about terrorism and the curbing of militant groups. And I have, of course, here in mind General Musharraf's missed opportunity immediately after 2001, when he did have the chance to crack down on militant groups, but it chose not to do it at a time when actually he enjoyed a great deal of public support, but chose not to do it because of reasons of political expediency. As far as Mr. Rahimullah is concerned, I wanted to ask you about militant groups in the Punjab. You said nothing about that, and we've not heard anything about it. Particularly the political mainstreaming of groups such as Jamaatul Dawa, which is currently masquerading as the Milli Muslim League. And it brought to mind, indeed, General Tariq's observation that, and this we are told enjoys the backing of the military. How do you unleash, or how does the military justify unleashing radicalized individuals into a radicalized society? I mean, what are the terms on which this so-called amnesty, which has brought about the political mainstreaming of these groups, I mean, there is no transparency, so I'd just like to have your thoughts on that.
To National Party. The National Party, which was headed by the Minas Khan Bizinjo and the Dr. Malik Baroch was the Chief Minister, is also from our party. Especially all the speakers and Bilkhasus, Isudi Sahib ne bahut tafsilan roshni dali तालिबान के हवाले से और बलूचिस्तान के हवाले से। मैं समझता हूँ कि तालिबान के हवाले से हमारे माशरे में जो काउंटर नरेशन है वो इतना स्ट्रांग नहीं है, उसको स्ट्रांग करने की ज़रूरत है। और मेन काज भी यही है कि काउंटर नरेशन जो मजबूत होगा कोई चीज़ें ख़त्म होंगी। उसका बेहतरीन मिसाल मैं बलूचिस्तान के हवाले से देता हूँ कि नेशनल पार्टी स्टिल इज अंडर थ्रेट ऑफ मिलिटेंट्स। More than 100 leaders and workers of the National Party were killed by those militants. But still, we are not came under their pressure. और बहुत खूबसूरत और मजबूत तरीके से हम इस चीज़ को काउंटर कर रहे हैं कि इस आइन के छतरी तले, हकीकी वफाकियत के छतरी तले ही बलूचिस्तान का मसला हल हो सकता है। रही बात जो नेगोशिएशन का, बलूचिस्तान का एक तारीखी पस मंजर है, आप लोग सारे दोस्त से बखूबी वाकिफ हो। ये मुज़ाकरात 70s के दौर में भी हुआ था, तरत साहब को भी बनता है, ईश्वरी साहब को भी बनता है, उसकी वजह से बलूचिस्तान पूरा नॉर्मलाइज हो गया। रही बात ये जो नेगोशिएशन की बात की ईश्वरी साहब ने, इस पे डॉक्टर साहब ने बाकायदा अस्करी क़यादत को और सेवल क़यादत को, जमहूरी क़यादत को भी इत्मीनान में लिया और सारे मसले तय हो गए थे। और मैं समझता हूँ उसमें कोई भी ऐसी चीज़ नहीं थी जो वफाक के और आइन के खिलाफ थी, जो बातें डॉक्टर साहब ने की, फिर लेकिन वो मामला आगे नहीं जा सका। मैं समझता हूँ कि अगर वो मामला आगे जाता तो बलूचिस्तान का 70 to 80% ये मामला जो है खत्म होता। इसमें कोई शक नहीं है कि जो फॉरेन इन्वायरमेंट है, अपने लोगों को उस फोल्ड से निकालने के लिए हमें क्या करना चाहिए? आया द गन इज द ओनली सॉल्यूशन या फिर नेगोशिएशन? इस पे जो है आप मजीद रोशनी डालें कि इसको हम किस तरीके से ज्यादा इफेक्टिव कर सकते हैं। श्रीलंका का मिसाल, तामिल का मिसाल हमारे सामने है। ठीक है, इराडिक्शन हुआ, लेकिन बहुत सारे मामला अब भी वहां पे मौजूद है। इस मामले को हमेशा के लिए खत्म करने के लिए बलूचिस्तान को वफाक की तरफ से एक बहुत अच्छे गेस्चर की जरूरत है। और बिलखसूस मैं ये भी कहूँगा कि जो 18वीं तरमीम हुआ है हमारे लोग उसके लिए बहुत मुतमईन है, लेकिन फिर भी एक सेंट्रलिस्ट माइंडसेट है, उसको भी हमें देखने की जरूरत है कि जो इख्तियारात लोगों को दिए गए हैं उनको बहुत अच्छे स्पिरिट के साथ इम्प्लीमेंट भी करें। थैंक यू।
So the two speakers, General Tariq and Rahimullah, they have extensive experience over there. I also spent about 8 or maybe 14 years in the tribal areas and 3 years as commissioner in Malakand. I think the issues that they have raised, this is just a comment, is very appropriate. It's a question of rights. Where the state does not exist, nature abhors a vacuum. So just as like nature abhors a vacuum, if you don't have the writ, someone else is going to take it from you. And it's just on the tribal areas. Liari in Karachi, Katti Pahadi in Karachi, Tarnol in Islamabad, Barakau in Islamabad, 0 states writ. And you know what's happening in all these areas. We should not be apologetic about establishing our control. In the last 7 or 8 years, the state has done very well. And we Pakistanis are very lucky. 99.999% are for the constitution, for the state, for the army. And I really don't believe there's need for any counter-narrative. The narrative is perfect. It's just our weakness on the ground. We just have to be strong over there. And in this connection, I'll just end and say that, you know, the time has come. The tribal areas have to be merged. Tribal areas never in the history were a separate entity, never for the past 4,000 years. They need to be merged. All their affiliations are lateral towards the adjoining district. And we should not extend a system which has failed in Pakistan throughout all 4 provinces, the Criminal Procedure Code and Civil Procedure Code, and never take these codes to the tribal areas. I must have disposed of thousands of cases under the FCR. FCR, it has some very evil, iniquitous provisions. The preventive detention is. Otherwise, FCR cases are decided within 3 months. And I have not come across anyone in the tribal areas except for the lawyers and some NGOs who are against the FCR. Between the FCR is a state-sponsored jargon. It is not the vigilante justice of Upper Sindh and Lower Punjab. The government controls it. And I have disposed of hundreds of cases, maybe 1,000 cases. I have never lost a night's sleep out of bed. Thank you.
A lot of fissures and friction within society, and it's everywhere. It's how people allow this atmosphere of intrusion to develop and others to exploit it. So when this happens, we have an effect which is destabilizing the country. Now, why is there a destabilization of the country? I want to explain something, that war is a definition, does not mean a military conflict. War is a very all-encompassing subject, and the military conflict is the smallest and the last part of war. It has a lot of other things within it. There is the media, there is the economy, there is the infrastructure, there is stability, there is society which can be polarized or unified, and therefore this is another expression of war.
You might have noted, I very categorically and deliberately never mentioned civil government. Government is government. It doesn't matter whether it's military or civilian. So it's across the board. Whoever was in power didn't do what he was supposed to be doing. So and by the way, the military was not there for more than half. It was less than half.
Less than half.
Yes. So I think this is what it is, sir. Just to add on to what you said, the conflict in FATA, the people that look at it now in hindsight, and they come up with this thing that we've got to do this, merger or no merger and FCR. The FCR was never the basis of this conflict. The FCR has now become into a very important aspect. There were other issues, and they were related to development, progress, economy, opportunity building. We are ignoring all of that, and we are talking about the FCR.
But can all that come through FCR? That is the
डॉक्टर इसाक बलोच साहब आपने जो बात की, तो मैं तो ये कहूँगा कि आपकी पार्टी और बाकी पार्टियाँ जो इंतखाबात में हिस्सा लेती हैं, वो पाकिस्तान की जंग लड़ रही हैं बलूचिस्तान में. एक हमारे पश्तून आबादी है बलूचिस्तान की, वो भी पाकिस्तान की जंग लड़ रही हैं, और आपकी पार्टियाँ, क्योंकि आप तो उस इलाके की नुमाइंदगी करते हैं जहाँ पर काफ़ी मसला है. दूसरी बात यह है कि आपने कहा कि कोई काउंटर नैरेटिव नहीं है, लेकिन शकील दुरानी साहब कह रहे हैं कि काउंटर नैरेटिव के बगैर ही हम काफ़ी अच्छा कर रहे हैं. We are doing well. There has been no counter territory for the last 15-16 years. This January, a meeting was called by NECTA in Islamabad. They called people from different walks of life. Even ulama were there. I was also there. We came up with a lot of ideas. There were people who were, you can say, Islamist, leftist, everybody was there. And they came up with ideas for a counter narrative. January or ye ho gaya abhi November, we were told it is in the Interior Ministry. It is not yet final. So counter narrative, I think they are not interested. They think that we are doing well, so it's okay, without counter narrative. یہ ایک ہے. ٹاکنگ ود دا بلوچ ملیٹنٹس، آپ نے اپنی پارٹی کا ذکر کیا، ڈاکٹر مالک بلوچ کا ذکر کیا. انہوں نے مشورہ کیا ہوگا، لیکن میرے خیال میں ان کے پاس اختیار نہیں تھا، اس لیے وہ کوئی فیصلہ نہیں کر سکے. اور آپ کو پتہ ہے کہ جو ملیٹنٹس ہیں وہ جو پاکستان سے باہر ہیں خاص طور پہ، ان سے تو معاملہ کرنا بڑا مشکل ہے. ابھی وہ کسی اور سے ان کے رابطے ہیں، کسی اور کے ہاتھ میں شاید کھیل رہے ہیں، یہ مسئلہ ہے. اور جو آپ کے ہاں موجود ہے ڈاکٹر اللہ نظر بلوچ، وہ تو وہاں موجود ہے بلوچستان میں. اس کی فیملی کا بھی واقعہ ہوا تھا پچھلے دنوں کہ وہ چمن سے آ رہے تھے اور ان کو پکڑ لیا، پھر رہا کر دیا. تو اب یہ ہے کہ وہ تو آپ لوگوں کا علاقہ ہے جہاں پر ان کی پارٹی وہ BLF بڑی ایکٹیو ہے. تو ابھی ان سے کیسی بات ہوگی، کیا یہ ممکن ہے؟ آئی ڈونٹ نو. کلبھوشن یادو کا واقعہ ہوا بلوچستان میں ساری، تو اس کے ہوتے ہوئے پتہ میرے خیال میں لگتا یہ ہے کہ کوئی فی الحال امکانات نہیں ہیں امن مذاکرات کے لیے. اور یہ جو آپ نے بات کی ڈاکٹر فرزانہ، آپ نے جو کہا کہ پنجاب کے گروپس کا ہم نے ذکر نہیں کیا، جماعت الدعوہ، لشکر طیبہ، ملی مسلم لیگ ایک ہی ہے، مختلف نام ہیں. اور آپ نے اس کا ذکر نہیں کیا تحریک لبیک پاکستان، جس کی اچھی پرفارمنس رہی الیکشن میں، جو 2 بائی الیکشن ہوئے، ان کو زیادہ ووٹ ملے ہیں. They got more votes, as you know, in NA 120 Lahore and NA 4 Peshawar. Jamaat al-Dawa didn't do well. So I don't know, because this is a very controversial issue, whether they should be mainstream or not. But I think they also have been exposed in the election. They couldn't do well. Jamaat al-Dawa got, I think, 3,000 votes in Peshawar, maybe 6,000 in Lahore. But the Labak, Tehreek al-Labak, which is a very emotional kind of thing, they try to attract support in the name of Mumtaz Qadri. And these are Barelvis, mind you, not Deobandis. So that is a very, I think, dangerous issue, and this should be looked into. Baki, I think you answered the questions. Everybody wants the reforms in FATA. Everybody wants that there should be a merger. And there are some voices against the merger also. The issue is unresolved. But FATA is critical to the security of Pakistan. We have ignored FATA and we have paid the cost. It's time there were reforms in FATA. Thank you.
Well, I think what exactly he has in mind, supposing he was supposed to give a counter narrative, what is his counter narrative? Will you please answer this question? So exactly what you have in mind, what do you think that counter narrative should be? You don't have to articulate it that precisely, but at least something that you might like to say so that we know, because this has been raised so many times and it raises questions in me, what exactly, how would it transform really the terrorist scene in Pakistan by this counter narrative, and what effect would it have in ideologically and otherwise?
یہ آ گیا ہے کہ ہم بالکل ایک سیدھا لکیر کھینچ تھے کہ بھائی وہ لکیر کے اس طرف ہے، ہمارا سول سوسائٹی، ہمارا ملک جو ہے اس لکیر کے اس طرف ہے. ہم ان کو بیڈ اور گڈ میں بھی تقسیم نہیں کریں. دس از دا ٹائم. فرض کرو جیسے بات کی ابھی کتنا خطرناک ہے کہ جو بریلوی شعبہ ہے وہ بھی ریڈیکلائز ہو رہا ہے. دیوبندی تو تھے ہی تھے، وہ بھی ہو رہے ہیں، لیکن پھر بھی وہاں پہ بیٹھے ہیں. پورا اسلام آباد کو انہوں نے سیج کیا ہوا ہے کوئی 10-15 دنوں سے، اور سارے راستے بند ہیں. تو میں کہتا ہوں کہ جو اہم رول ہوتا ہے وہ ریاست کا ہوتا ہے، اسٹیٹ کا ہوتا ہے. مطلب یہ جتنے بھی چیزیں ہمارے معاشرے میں سرایت کر گئی اس کا ایک اہم رول ہے. رہی بات بلوچستان کا، میں کہتا ہوں کہ بلوچستان کا جو اب وہ جو معاملہ ہے ان کی وہ معاملات اتنے نہیں ہیں. اب سول سوسائٹی، لوگ، عوام میں ان کے دلوں میں کوئی محبت نہیں ہے، نفرت ہے کہ بھئی وہ دہشت گرد ہے. اس لیے دہشت گرد ہے، آپ مالک کو بھی مارتے ہو، حاصل کو بھی مارتے ہو، ایک عام پولیٹیکل ورکر کو مانتے ہو. اس کو ہم نے بہت تندئی سے مضبوط طریقے سے آگے لے گئے. لیکن بعض اوقات ہم مسئلہ پسندی کے شکار ہوتے ہیں اس نیریٹو میں. میرا مطلب یہ تھا.
شکریہ.